Autoline Network is a great podcast with daily updates on automotive news. This week, they interviewed Jeff Stout of YanFeng, a Chinese-based auto supplier of interiors, exteriors, seating, and electronics. And boy, did Jeff deliver the hammer. He's saying that for auto companies to survive in this new reality led by Tesla, car makers need to completely rethink everything they're doing, from removing the steering wheel from being fixed in the center to massive cost-cutting efforts. We've got Jeff Lutz joining us. Jeff is a ex-supply chain executive at Fortune 100 companies. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, great to be with you, Herbert.
I know you love watching Autoline podcasts. They have some great guests. They do evaluate the auto business. Traditionally, they're an old world legacy auto focus, but now they're starting to more and more talk about what needs to happen to combat, this new reality of just the new world. And this one's interesting, right? Because YanFeng is a pretty big company. Let me share a little bit more about what they do. So this is a very large company. They're a tier one supplier to automotive companies. They do interiors, seating, exteriors, electronics, and they're really setting themselves up to become the new supplier for the new world of robotaxi autonomy. What would the interior look like? But they're big. Look at this, $15 billion, 57,000 employees. They're everywhere. They're pretty large. What do you want to, anything about YanFeng before we get going to the videos?
No, I think there's great insights in the video in terms of like how to think differently moving forward. I think this is something that Autoline is actually doing a great job of. Is they have guests and they have themselves that are decades of experience in the auto industry, but they're kind of looking ahead of like, look, what got you here is not what's going to get you where you need to be later in this decade and into the next decade. And what you'll see with this company, you'll see some of the dialogue, it really focuses on the kind of abrupt change that's needed. Not only just think about like what the car looks like or some of the choices and features in a car, but actually how companies organize themselves and how they even think about these things. So this is the kind of transition that a lot of these companies need to go to even be in the same conversation with where Tesla's going, to be honest with you. So be great to watch this.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this YanFeng, I love their thinking. I can't wait to show the audience here what they're planning to do with the steering wheel and the seatings and so forth. I thought that was brilliant. This is Jeff Stout. He's also another Jeff. So let's listen to how they think.
CES, you showed me the concept interior for a new vehicle. That was this radical change. I mean, you guys sort of like gutted the front seat interior area, right? You didn't show a back seat area.
Correct.
There was no instrument panel whatsoever. I mean, there wasn't a steering wheel. There were pedals that retracted into, was it the floor or the firewall?
Into the firewall. Yep.
Into the firewall. So take us through your thinking of what you just described of taking a well-established company that has ways of doing it and coming up with this totally new approach to designing an interior.
Yeah, so it's fundamental to what the team does. Other companies have their teams as well, so I'm not saying that only YF could do this. But our team, 5 minutes away from here in Novi, basically asking some fundamental questions. What would it take to radically reduce the amount of time to assemble our products together, as well as our products into the vehicle? That was a starting point. And some of that came from Stellantis CEO saying, hey, I want to have a 10-hour car. I think Elon Musk mentioned, hey, I want to have a 10-hour car. It's like, we're hearing this kind of mantra of our assembly lines have to get to be to the point where we can just kick out cars.
Okay, Jeff, this is very interesting. So they talked about how they're going to insert the whole module, but then in another part we'll show where it goes by removing the steering on the front, by hiding it, letting it come up. You can now remove parts on the actual seating of the car. You don't need to move it back and forth anymore, and it can reduce space in between. What was your thinking there?
Yeah, if you've listened to me for the last year, I've talked about everything coming down to process time, total process time in the factory for your customer. In this case, it'll be the tier one auto OEM. And what is their assembly time to take your module and insert it into the vehicle and secure it and have it fully be both mechanically and electrically functional? And that's what their customers are looking for, is how do you take that total process time down? Tesla led the way on that. And Tesla's taking a huge leap on that with the compact vehicle. I'm going to be so excited to see that. But in the industry of mechanical assembly, whether it's at the auto level, whether it's at the microelectronics, consumer electronics level, one of the key things you focus on to take your cost structure down, again, that it's that conversion cost structure. It's converting that bucket of materials to that finished product that's fully distributed at the final location. Thing you focus on is that total process time. And the first step you want to do is you don't want to focus on total process time of a part that shouldn't even be there. You want to focus on, can I do part count reduction? Can I do simplification? And that's what they're getting to in this video is, can I do that simplification first? And then can I figure out how to modularize this assembly and reduce the total assembly time? If I reduce assembly time, I need less capital, I need less labor, there's less components, there's less mass. Think about EVs, think about the importance of reducing mass as well. Less consumables as well. Consumables are the adhesives, the gaskets, the welds, the things that are needed to secure things in place. So all these things come together as kind of one big basket. And that's what the theme he's talking about. And then we'll get into the actual concept they're talking about. But the overriding theme is reducing process time, reducing part count, simplification. The auto industry needs a complete kind of overhaul in how they think of this today.
Okay. Let's watch the parts of the video and you can explain it to us.
I think as a theme, the industry is reacting at this point, I would argue in a healthy way, to the Teslas of the world that over the last 20 years has been, okay, he's going to try to do whatever. And so there's a recognition of, boy, Tesla's doing something that we need to be aware of and we need to kind of address. In addition to that, you've got the Chinese automakers that are emulating Tesla, I would argue, very effectively. And as part of that, this sense of, hey, you got to start over with how you develop, how you manufacture, how you deliver vehicles with an eye towards value to the consumer and cost. And so, yeah, Ford announced, Farley, the Skunk Works idea to say, we need to take a whole new look. And frankly, if I was to put words in his mouth, 100% not his words, to be clear, I would say his message to the organization is, here in Dearborn, we've had this established way to develop cars. That's not going to work anymore. And so we need a whole new way of doing that with an eye towards value and cost that we've kind of lost sight of over the course of years because we were able to just incrementally improve year after year the vehicle. But now that we're on this whole new thing that we don't know that much about, we have to get educated in a hurry, and we've got to be able to.
Yeah, you need. So what he's getting to here is like he. This is some of the concepts I've spoken about as well. It's not only just making the feature value trade-off, that value per dollar trade-off for the particular vehicle you're working on. It's how many vehicles are you working on? How many models do you have? What kind of complexities in your factory? And then go into the vehicle and looking at the trade-off decisions. What is this instrument cluster? Why do we have all these knobs with vacuum metallization? This is basically how you take a piece of plastic and make it look like a piece of metal. That's the process that's used. It's called vacuum metallization. Why do you have all these parts it's a very expensive process, by the way, to do. And that's when you see all these knobs and buttons and controls in the car, you see all these different surface treatments that are done to mold them and to make them look premium. And this thing costs money. And you get back to this value per dollar equation of like, well, there's consumers that say, well, I want that luxury feel, but Tesla made that, and this is what he said. He goes, a lot of people talk about this, but Tesla actually walked the walk, and they said, to hell with the instrument cluster. We don't need it in our cars anymore. And sure enough, the car without an instrument cluster is the number one selling vehicle, not EV, vehicle in the world, the Model Y. And if you put the Model 3 with it, it's even a further lead. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the value per dollar trade-off, being bold enough to make those big decisions. Now, let's think about the big decisions that are probably coming in the Model 2, if we can think about. And then he's also talking about you have to structurally change how you're doing work. Who's a supplier? How many suppliers do you have? How many models do you have? What % do you insource and vertically integrate versus outsource? And these are the big decisions, because if you decide, because right now the current auto industry is roughly 80% outsourced and 20% insourced, which is also how their engineering footprint is aligned too. Because if you're 80% outsourced, a lot of that engineering work is being done and farmed out at those suppliers. So if they want to do a 180 on that and flip it like Tesla has, that has dramatic structural implications to how they do work. And this is what he's talking about. Like, these are some of the big decisions that the auto industry needs to confront soon. They can't just say that I'm doing, I'm going to do this vehicle. I'm going to target, $30,000 to $40,000, like the Equinox from G. I'm going to do these vehicles. They're going to be out in this time frame. They're going to be these price points. They've made these promises and they haven't hit them. And the reason is they haven't fixed these underlying structural issues. I think that's the key message.
I'm going to jump to the video, Jeff, to the fun part. If you're okay, I'm going to show this video. I thought this was brilliant. I think this is the part here. Yeah. So we saw this part, right? It's being added this way, but yeah. So, oops, this is actually not the part. Okay. Yeah, there it is. So the point was, if you saw that, where because the steering wheel is not connected to the center and it's not needing to be put in the front, you can have a much larger screen in front. And then they hit away the way that the steering wheel comes out. Therefore, they were saying that they don't need to make the seat having all those controls to go forward, backwards, and so forth. And they don't need the space in between the seats. The seats and the console can all be all one part without any gaps in between where you lose your keys and so forth. I thought that this was brilliant in the thinking. So when you do it this way, you've completely changed how things happen.
Yeah, and there's still some complexity here because now you've got things that weren't moving parts that are now moving parts, that arm, the pedals coming out. But they're trying to solve for another problem here too, which is the transition from vehicles that are driven 100% of the time to vehicles that are only driven, this transition period of autonomy where you're only driving part of the time. And I think we're going to have a number of years where vehicles are in this transition. Now, I think there's a couple of ways to approach it. If you can modularize it in your factory and give the consumer the option of having steering, having pedals or not, that would be the kind of the lowest cost approach. But I think there's going to be this transition period where consumers aren't going to know, and they're not going to be 100% certain that they feel like they can be driven around all the time. So you're going to be in this transition period. So they're kind of showing you their forward thinking of both, like, all right, if we're going to be in this transitionary period, it's going to be some added costs, but we can actually make it very modular, very simple, and then we can take other areas of the vehicle and reduce complexity. And then you showed the one large screen. That's the Tesla concept. That's getting rid of the instrument panel and saying all input. They're even at a point right now where they're just at all input is going to be touch related in some voice. And probably by the time that Tesla comes out with their next generation vehicle, I would think that one of the things that Tesla is measuring is the percent of input that is touch or a button versus voice. And I'm assuming they want to drive that voice input way up.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting concept there. Let's listen to another part of the interview.
Change is hard. So if you are Ford or VW or Toyota or whoever, to say, we're going to take a new look at this and we're going to do it completely differently. Very easy to say, very, very hard to do. Because when you have that skunk works, Farley's words, doing this thing, and they're told, hey, you are independent of Dearborn, you do the right thing. Do you think everybody in Dearborn is like, yeah, that's a good idea? Like, I'll keep my hands off of that. I don't know the answer to that question.
But I do know the answer. Hell no.
Exactly. There's kingdoms, and this isn't picking on Ford, just human nature says that, yeah, I've got a standard. I've got a business process for purchasing and manufacturing and quality, and you guys need to follow the rules. These rules are here for a reason. I'm here to protect you, skunkworks people. You need to make sure that you follow my rules. And then it'll be this fascinating moment. In my experience, it usually comes to, there'll be a very significant moment where Farley will have to decide, do I make the skunkworks follow the rules or do I let them break the rules? And that'll be an important moment for Ford and for VW and for every automaker that tries to do this.
So Jeff, you've been in there. So you've been at the executive conference calls, conference meetings. You have done the skunk works in large, massive organizations. Tell me how that works.
It can be difficult. It can be difficult on the employees. It can be difficult on the management. If you don't have a visionary at the helm, it can even be more difficult. So you need that visionary at the helm. Remember when Elon was doing this, he ran his whole company this way, but he was actually bending the arc of an entire industry. And that's where the gnashing of teeth have been. These companies have to do it in like the industry, the arc has been bent, and these companies need to move or get out of the way essentially. And they have to deal with all this internal, resistance that they've got to work through. So he's absolutely right the way he's describing it. When you set up these small teams and you say they've got full autonomy, when it comes time to make big decisions around capital and around purchasing decisions, that's where it has to link up and join up with the larger machine or truly be self-funded and be out on its own. And if it's out on its own, it's still going to be difficult in the beginning. Like they could be making all the right decisions as a small skunkworks, but they won't have volume leverage behind their decisions, and they're going to be highly unprofitable at the outset. And with, you have to think of these skunkworks as like a multi-year, you can't think of them as a 1-year flash in the pan. You got to think of them as a multi-year, multi-generational product investment where your skunkwork actually blends into and creates the new company. And then you figure out, with the existing assets, what's needed to maintain, the product that's already in the field that was made by the way the company used to work prior. So it's difficult on employees. It's difficult on the management team. It's difficult to do. What Jeff says is true. It's and I'm not speaking in the third person about myself, the Jeff in the video. What he's saying is like, you can talk, you can say all these things, you can say you're going to simplify, Farley's saying all these things, but when you actually have to go do it, it is very difficult to do when you have an existing, kind of structure inside of the company. So I've been acquired. I've been part of the, inquiring company. I mean, I've seen this on both sides. I've seen the transition go from, prior phones to smartphones, where we had to basically create our entire portfolio and start with just 1 or 2 phones. And those are very difficult transitions. But if you get the right people in the right leadership positions, you have the right vision statement, the right mission, the right leader at the top, it can work. But you need all of those things to work. And that's why there's very, very low probability of success in some of these transitions. And these companies ultimately just have to transform how they do business, or they won't be in business.
Okay, good. Let's watch the next clip here.
Let's talk about YF for a minute.
Okay.
So when you're hearing this message from these guys, is this a situation where basically they're just saying in a different way, we want you to reduce costs?
Mm-hmm.
And B, how does your company deal with radical innovation?
I wish I could say super well, but there's people who are humans who work at YF as well. And I would argue humans don't like change. I had an innovation guy work for me for years and years and years who would always say the only person who likes change is a wet baby. And he's 100% right. There's no human being out there who's like, I just want to change stuff. Maybe Elon Musk, but in general then, inside YF, we have a responsibility, my team as well as the broader YF team, not to say, okay, how do we find a way to just make stuff cheaper? That doesn't end well. You have to find a way to say, hey, how do I work with this automaker to give them the same value or more value, but find a way to do it more effectively, more innovatively? Trying to take what you have today and say, I'm going to shave 10% off of it, and then just, that's not a path to competitive advantage. And it's really not a path to long-term success for the customer. So the conversations we have with customers are always in that, as soon as the customer says, tell me what rules I need to break in order to provide value at a lower cost, now we're going to have a really good conversation. When they come to us and say, hey, you need to be 20% cheaper, but all the same rules apply, in general, we walk away. Because the only way to get there is to just do it in a way that's not really sustainable. You're cutting corners, you're just making it a worse product by 20% in order to get the 20% reduction. But when there is an opportunity to say, well, if you allow us to do it this way, there's always a better way to do what's being done.
I think one of the biggest underappreciated thing that Elon and Tesla has done is Elon's creation of the company that can do all things he just said, just, breaking rules, starting fresh, all the rules that he does about meetings and so forth. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's so much there. He's basically saying like, you can't just will this into existence. People have to be ready to make the big decisions. And if you think about Tesla, Elon's name was invoked a couple times during this interview, and he's started this company over, what are we now, almost 15 years ago or more, depending on, the timing. And he's been hiring people along the way that are, all in his likeness. And he's been mentoring them along the way. A lot of the senior leadership team at Tesla have been there for more than 7, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I know Drew's there going on almost 20 years, I think, soon. And when you have that, you've basically ingrained into your leadership team that thinking, and that they actually have like thinking, because you don't stick around that long if you don't have kind of aligned thinking. So the way that Tesla's wired this way, when you hear Farley, you hear some of these other companies talking about it, they have the right intentions, but what percent of the companies actually wired in the right way? Are they all thinking the same way? And at Tesla, that's come from the CEO down for literally decades, and that the whole team is really set up and ingrained in that fashion. He's hired everybody in his likeness. So that's what's difficult about this. The other difficult thing he's talking about is the interaction with the customer, the OEM, of like, if you're just asking me to do a cost reduction exercise, I'm sure I can figure out how to take some cost out. But the real conversation needs to be around the business model and around the interaction with the consumer. And we have to fundamentally change that for what's upcoming in auto, because you're taking out the combustion engine, which has, 80 million units a year of volume, tremendous supply base, tremendous cost reductions over so many years. And now you've got this disruptive, a few million units of EV that doesn't have that scale yet. And so when you don't have that scale yet, and quite frankly, from a battery perspective, that's a cost that's added that's not in the combustion vehicle. You have this disconnect of like, if I want the right feature value trade-off, I've got to get really smart in the other areas of the design and figure out how to do it a fundamentally different way so that EV can compete with ICE. And I think what we're going to see with the Model 2 is we're going to see it completely overtake ICE. You're going to see specs that are probably of the $30,000 to $50,000 vehicle range that have come down into the $20-something thousand vehicle range, courtesy of design and innovation and what you can do with EV that you can't do with ICE. So there's a lot of things wrapped up in that message, but the central thing is like, you can't just you can shave some cost out, but you're not going to get the transformational change unless you go right to the core of the business model and right to the front of the ideation process, or how that product is being developed, and make those big, huge, important decisions out front. And I think that's the key message. The other example I would give you is that if Tesla were to acquire all the Ford assets and have the Mustang Mach-E, have the F-150, they wouldn't be able, there's an architecture that's already there. It's existing. There's a tremendous amount of complexity. Could they figure out how to take a couple $100 or a few $1,000s out of the vehicle? Probably. But even that won't be enough. That's not enough transformational change to make those two products successful in the marketplace. And that's Ford's already realized that. That's why they're minimizing volumes until they can get to their next generation of vehicles. So I'm just trying to kind of pull all this thing together and kind of like, have it come together in terms of like how I'm thinking about it and how I think it's really playing out in the marketplace. And that's what this company is doing. They're going out to their customers saying, look, there's a completely different way to think about seating, interior, autonomy, for the future that'll get you the cost structure you need to compete with Tesla. That's already and the Chinese that are already thinking like this.
That's a fantastic point, Jeff. I mean, I'm finding it very fascinating that what you just said here, a supplier is the one that's innovating, that's going to drive and maybe be a lifeline, be a lifeline for these other automakers, because these guys are coming up with great ideas. Just wanted to point out again here that, this company, YanFeng, right? They do interiors, they do seating, they do exteriors, they do the cockpit electronics. They do a lot of things, and this is why they're so big. 50 plus automotive customers. And as the world moves into the autonomy, they're really rethinking the interiors. It could be the lifeline that these automakers are waiting for. And, have you ever seen that before? Like a supplier driving change to the customer? You just said
Yes. Yes, I have. I have. It's more rare. But it does happen, and it's meaningful. A lot of those suppliers get acquired eventually, or they become bigger, than the industry that they serve. There's examples of this in microelectronics today.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for pointing this Autoline video and your comments about it. Appreciate you. Follow Jeff on X at the Jeff Lutz. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.